I was feeling a bit nervous about speaking today, so I asked for some advice from a colleague, and he said two things. One, well, hopefully you won't have to follow on after David Walsh. Oh, well, I'll fail there, he said. Also, this is an audience who quite likes a chart. They like a good chart. So I hope that's true, because you've got 20 of them coming up. This is a story in charts. And what I'm hoping to explore with you is work from a number of colleagues that really looks at the overlap between these two narratives. So we're all too familiar with, on the right, our stark socioeconomic health inequalities and mortality inequalities that have persisted. And what we've seen in recent years is increasing recognition that actually for the whole population, overall life expectancy is no longer increasing. So what I want to look at through the next 20 minutes is what the overlap is here. So firstly, to look at our summary measures of mortality across the population, considering life expectancy and mortality rates. What we've seen over the last 30 years is this steady increase in the blue men and in the red women, steady increase up until the most recent years. And we see the last 4 or so data points, nothing's happening, a flat line in life expectancy growth. Is this unusual? Have we seen this historically? Is it okay that we have ups and downs in life expectancy? So what you're seeing here is the average annual change in life expectancy over time. So if we're seeing life expectancy increases above the line, and if it's falling below the line, and we can see that historically, going back into the 19th century, yes, life expectancy was very volatile and seesawed about. We see a big dip associated with the Second World War here, with some gains in life expectancy after that. And then really in the subsequent period, consistent gains in life expectancy. And if we zoom in on the most recent 40 years, we can see that the last time we saw a big dip in life expectancy gains was in the early 1970s. And also, if we look at the first decade of the 21st century, the smooth period here, we're seeing average annual gains of about 15 weeks a year in life expectancy for men, 10 weeks a year in life expectancy for women, until we get to here. And now we're seeing really very little increase in life expectancy each year. So when did things change? Well, this is looking at mortality rates. So what we want is mortality rates going down, and we can see we did have a period of smooth falling in life expectancy, in mortality rates. And when we do a segmented regression, so we fit a line to this and we allow it to break if the trend changes. What we see is in the early 1990s, things changed to this steady improvement pattern in mortality rates. But around 2012 for men, slightly later for women, we've switched to this pattern of really no improvement in mortality rates and actually a slight increase in mortality rates for women. And so what's the latest on overall inequalities in mortality? Looking at both absolute and relative. So this is just pulling from the Scott Health Inequalities app. You can see on the right-hand side relative inequalities in mortality. So this is total population deaths have steadily increased, but we also see this bit over here where actually the absolute gap in mortality is increasing between most and least deprived. So we went on to look in that in a little bit more detail. I did some shading on this graph and realized it came out something like a Belgian flag, but that was to try and just chunk up the time periods for you to see. So this is looking at mortality rates by SIMD quintile, and with the overall being the dark blue line for women and men. And really of interest is the yellow band in the middle, 2006, 2011. We can see that mortality rates were steadily falling for all deprivation quintiles. Admittedly, the gap wasn't closing, and they're coming down pretty much in parallel, but everybody's mortality was improving. When we get to the red bar, so we took that 2012 date that we found as the time when things changed for the worse, and we look at how each deprivation quintile experiences mortality after that, and what we see is this fanning out. So we've got this widening gap here, and really in our most deprived areas, death rates have been increasing since 2012. In our least deprived areas, the improvements are smaller, but we are still seeing mortality improvements there. So we're resulting in this fanning out and an increase in this absolute gap in death rates between most and least deprived. And we can look at this another way, which is to look at the lights are going down. That signifies something to me. We can look at the percentage change in mortality rates across each of those periods. So taking that yellow bar from beginning to end, how much did mortality rates improve? And that red bar, how much did mortality rates improve? And so the first period is represented by the circles down at the bottom here, and we can see that we're getting around about a 10% improvement in mortality rates across that period for both men and women. There is some gradient, so the more deprived areas on the left are seeing smaller improvements than the least deprived, but everybody's seeing mortality improvements. The triangles represent the more recent period, 2012 to 2017, and what we see emerging is this stark gradient in mortality improvement. So for both men and women, those living in the most deprived areas are seeing increasing rates of mortality, increasing death rates, and a steeper gradient in the levels of improvement across socioeconomic groups. So what more can we do to understand the drivers and contributors to these patterns that we're seeing? And the one approach that we've taken is something called decomposition in life expectancy. And so this is really taking a change in life expectancy over a period of time and seeing how death rates in different groups have contributed to that life expectancy change. And we can take different groups. We can take groups by age, by certified cause of death, or by area level deprivation, or by combinations of those. So just to explain that in a little bit more detail, what we did was we looked at two periods. We looked at period one, this steady improvement period that we saw earlier in the first decade of the 21st century. And we took the change in life expectancy over this more recent period from around about 2012 to see what contributed to life expectancy change in each of these periods. And those with a keen eye will notice that those periods are different in duration. So we didn't look at the total change in life expectancy from beginning to end. What we looked at was the average annual change in life expectancy in the first period versus the second period in order that we were getting some comparable data. And what you get is you can build up these stacks. So in the early period in women, what we saw was about 10 weeks a year of life expectancy were gained on average in that earlier period. And we can see how death rates in each age group contribute to that. So there were improvements in death rates in those under 35, which contributed about a week of life expectancy to the overall. Again, in those in the next 20-year age band, improvements in death rates. Improvements in mortality in those 55 to 74 contributed quite a significant amount of life expectancy gain, and similarly in the next age band. And there were small improvements in mortality in those age 90 plus, and these total up to this life expectancy gain of, on average, 10 weeks a year. If we then look at the life expectancy change in the more recent period, from 2012 to 2017, first notable thing is that total change is virtually not there. It's 0.05, but whatever I did with the chart, I couldn't make it visible to you. And we then look at how the age groups contribute. So the under 35s, still some improvements in mortality nudging us up. Adverse mortality patterns in those 35 to 55 drag us back down below the line. Small improvements in 55 to 75 and the next age group, but again, worsening death rates in those 90 plus, total up to us pretty much not changing life expectancy at all over that period for women. We can do a similar approach looking at broad causes of death. So this is certified cause of death grouped into 8 broad categories. And we can see that in that earlier period, the majority of gains were contributed due to falling improvements in mortality due to circulatory cause, so heart attacks, strokes. But improvements across most causes of death stacking up, some worsening in mortality due to drugs and dementia, leading to our total change. The more recent period, again, what we can see is we are still improving mortality rates in circulatory causes, but it's very, very much smaller. So we're only gaining about 3 weeks of life expectancy due to improvements in deaths from those circulatory causes compared to 8 weeks per year previously. And after the circulatory causes in cancer, nearly all other causes of death are worsening, leading to this stalling in mortality improvements. So we can layer this up. This is a map, and if we imagine that we overlay those age group findings with our cause of death findings and sort of put them over each other like a map and then look down upon them. And if we walk along the bottom, you're increasing in age, and if we walk up the side, we're looking at different causes of death. And as you look down on each square, if an age group cause of death is making a positive impact on life expectancy, so you're seeing improved survival and extended life expectancy, then those will come up as blue, and the darker blue the better. If things are giving you a worsening of mortality, worse death rates for that age group and cause, then they'll appear as red. So this is the earlier period again, and then this is the more recent period. And I just wanted to pull a few things out of this. If we look at our circulatory causes, we can see what we saw in that cause of death chart before, that we're seeing very much smaller gains in life expectancy due to heart attacks and strokes. And this is occurring in the sort of 55 to 90-year-olds. If we look at dementia, that's making a contribution in the slightly older age group with worsening mortality rates. And if we look at drug-related deaths, these were having virtually no impact on life expectancy in the earlier period and are now exerting a negative impact on life expectancy in younger age groups, in fact up to about 55 in the later period. And we can look sort of down an age group, and we can see that 55 to 75-year-olds in the previous period, in nearly all causes of death, you were seeing improvements in death rates and extension of life expectancy. But if we look in the later period, across many causes of death, this relatively young age group of 55 to 74 are seeing worsening death rates, leading to a dragging down of life expectancy. So for our next chart, I want you to imagine these two charts overlaid each other, and one minus the other, the difference between the two. So this is the change in contribution to life expectancy between the earlier and the later period. And it really highlights that fall in improvements due to circulatory causes is making a major impact, and that drug-related deaths are making a major impact as well. So everything we've seen so far has been on total population. What does this mean for socioeconomic inequality? So this is life expectancy change over the earlier period by deprivation quintile. And we can see all quintiles are seeing gains in life expectancy. This is the change in life expectancy by deprivation quintile over the most recent period. So those living in our least deprived areas are still seeing gains in life expectancy, albeit of a smaller scale. In women living in our most deprived areas, there's been almost a complete reversal of life expectancy gains. So we're seeing nearly 8 weeks a year of loss of life expectancy, meaning that just in about 7 years, women in our most deprived areas will see a 1-year fall in life expectancy if patterns continue as they are. If we look a little bit into the age group patterning of this, I'm afraid there's a lot of age groups on this, so it gets a little bit more complicated. But the main thing to see is that this is our least deprived quintile of women. The darker bar is life expectancy change by age group in the earlier period, and the lighter bar the later period. And the notable thing is that in the later period, there are still gains in life expectancy across all, due to mortality rates in all age groups, bar the 35 to 40-year-olds. But they're smaller in scale, and the impacts, the negative changes are mostly in these older age groups over here. If we look at the same for our least deprived quintile, we can see that across all age groups, mortality rates are worsening, leading to these groups contributing to the fall in life expectancy, and most notably amongst this 35 to 55-year-old age group. And if we look at causes of death, I'm just going to pull out the 3 that we noted in the earlier heat map as being important for life expectancy change: ischemic heart disease, dementia and Alzheimer's, and drug-related deaths. We can see that the fall in improvements in ischemic heart disease is having a big impact on life expectancy gains. This is in our least deprived areas. Some impacts due to increasing mortality from dementia, very little impact from drug-related deaths. Contrast that with death rates in our most deprived areas, and we can see that drug-related deaths are having a huge impact in mortality. but also ischemic heart disease. The fall in improvements from deaths due to ischemic heart disease is having an impact, and similarly, dementia and Alzheimer's also of a similar scale there. And if we remember back to our overlapped heat maps, so this is the change in life expectancy between the two periods, how age groups and causes are contributing. I'm not expecting you to see that, it's just a reminder, but I'm just going to contrast that same map for our least deprived fifth of population and our most deprived. And again, I wanted to pull out three things here. One is to look at this fall in improvements due to circulatory cause. We can see a very deep fall in improvements here in our least deprived areas in older women, but this is shifted over to the left to the younger age groups in our most deprived areas. So we're really seeing that impact in midlife there and not in older age groups. We can see that deaths due to external causes, so this includes suicide as well as accidents. There are improvements in mortality rates in our least deprived areas, but the exact opposite in our most deprived areas. And then these causes of death in drug-related deaths and other causes, so that encompasses quite a broad range from perinatal through to diabetes. These causes of death are not really having any impact on life expectancy in our least deprived areas and are having a very strong impact in our most deprived areas. So, how to summarise this? Well, in answer to the question, yes, there are socio-economic inequalities within the recent stalling of mortality improvements in Scotland. If things carry on as they are, we're going to continue to see a widening of inequalities in deaths due to your socio-economic position. And there are differences in the mortality rates by cause and age group that are contributing to life expectancy change according to your level of income and where you live. And what should we take from this? Well, it's in some ways a bit of a horror story, but it's not inevitable. If there's anything positive that we can take from a story of inequality, it's that it shows us that it doesn't need to be that way. Life expectancy is not falling everywhere. It's not falling in all areas, it's not falling in all groups, and it's certainly not falling in all countries. And that tells us, amongst other things, that we've not reached some magical maximum age, and therefore we should just accept that life expectancy gains are going to flatten off. We can see very clearly that actually we're not talking about, adding a few weeks of years to your life when you're 90 that you may or may not want. We're talking about people in our most deprived areas dying in their 30s, 40s and 50s from preventable causes, and that is having an impact on our population level life expectancy. I think we can see also that there's a broad spread of causes and death, of age groups that are contributing to the stalling of life expectancy. And therefore we need to understand what the underpinning causes of that are, that there's not going to be a single explanation for a stalling or falling of life expectancy. We need to understand the shared causes of the causes. We can't wait. I think we need to act on plausible contributors. We know what conditions of living, what lack of access to health and social care services does to people's health, well-being and risk of death. And it's highly likely that austerity policies' impacts on those things has contributed to what we're seeing now, and we need to be clear about the need to reverse those. I think one thing that's helpful about looking at this decomposition approach is it can encourage us to a proportionate response to proportional contributors. So I think it's very easy for people to want to seize upon a cause of an overall mortality pattern, an overall health pattern, and say, well, we need to act on that, we need to act on ACEs, we need to act on something else. I think we can see that there are a range of causes, and we need to be proportionate in our response to those, but also accept the complexity that underpins those patterns. And my final thing would be that we need to, as a public health community, seek to refine our understanding and also build a narrative about the relationship between overall life expectancy stalling and socioeconomic inequalities in mortality, because we can see they're very much linked, and I think it's very easy for how we interpret the narrative around about life expectancy to be drawn towards conversations about older age and not wanting to live forever, and I think we need to develop how we understand it and how we speak about this in order to make sure that it's rooted in what we understand about the inequalities that we've demonstrated today. And yes, very importantly, very much of this is contributed from colleagues in National Records for Scotland, who did a lot of the decomposition work, and also in Health Scotland, who've contributed to very many of the charts and analysis that are presented here today. So thanks to them as well. And that's all from me. Oh, more there.